Welcome! Today's class is going to help prepare you for our quiz tomorrow. Our quiz is going to cover equations, graphs, and tables. So if we can, this video is meant to help you understand exactly what you need to do. You're going through our study guide and figuring out what we need to understand about this quiz tomorrow. To help us get through this study guide worksheet, we have a sample problem going on here. First of all, we have our car, and our car is traveling 32 miles for every 1 gallon of gas that you put into that car. So we're going to take this table and we're going to fill it in based on number of gallons compared to how many miles. So based on our information here, we get 32 miles for every 1 gallon. So that means in 1 gallon that I'm driving, I can drive 32 miles. Then if I go put another gallon of gas in, I'm going to actually go another 32 miles. So I can do 32 times 2 and get 64, or I can just tack on another 34 from that, another 32 from that previous 32. Now I'm going an extra mile. I'm putting in an extra gallons, and I'm putting in 3 gallons into my car. So that means I can go an extra 32 miles, or I can take 32 multiplied by 3. And that's going to get me up to 96. Now I jump up. I can't just simply add 32 anymore, because now I'm not going from 3 to 4, I'm going from 3 to 5. So I need to take this shortcut, because again, mathematicians, us being lazy, we want to keep adding 32 every single time, so we're looking for shortcuts. I take 32 multiplied by 5, because I have 32 miles for every gallon. And now I'm putting in 5 gallons of gas into my car, so now I can take those 32 miles for every gallon multiplied by my 5 gallons, and I'm going to get, let me just crank it out quick here, 2 times 5 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, carry the 1 is 16, I go to 160 miles on 5 gallons. Then to figure out 10 gallons, I just take that exact same idea, and if I go 32 miles in every 1 gallon, I'm now traveling 10 gallons, I'm going to have 10 groups of those 32 miles, which means 32 times 10, I'm going 320 miles. Now we take a look and we have to assign which variable, which thing that changes, G or M, is our dependent and our independent variable. One thing we're looking at, gallons was one of our variables. Gallons changed. It went from 1 to 2 to 3, jumped up to 5, jumped up to 10. So it definitely changed. That means it's a variable. But now we got to find out, is it an independent variable or a dependent variable? We're going to consider this one an independent variable, because I can put whatever amount of gallons of gas in my car that I want. It doesn't not affected by anything else. Nothing impacts that other than my decision. It's an independent variable. What does depend on something, the other thing that does change, is the amount of miles I can go. The amount of miles I travel depends on how much gallons go into my car. So if I can only go 32 miles if I only put in 1 gallon of gas, the distance, the amount of miles that I'm going it's dependent on the amount of gallons that I get put in, therefore making it the dependent variable. After we establish those dependent and independent variables, now when I'm graphing, I'm always going to put that independent variable on my x-axis. I want to do that because my y-axis is going to be reserved for the dependent variable, the one that has change, or that is impacted by the other variable. So I'm going to put my dependent variable, which we said were gallons of gas, on the x-axis. That's a rough looking G, but we'll call it a G. Then my dependent variable then just goes right onto my y-axis. It depends on those number of gallons to give you how far you're going to travel. So it makes my miles my dependent variable on my y-axis. I'm going to give myself a title for this graph. This is a graph for miles per gallon. As we fill in this table again really quickly, we went 32, 64, 96. We jumped up to 120, and then we went up to 340. Oops, I'm sorry, I misspoke. That was 180 and 360. Sorry for that error. So this is to get our numbers back there again. Now we got to make and adapt our scale. So we got to make our table fit onto our graph. When I'm making my scale, I have at least 22 unit rates down here on my graph, on my x-axis down below here. I have 22 tick marks, 22 units. I only need to go up to 10 on my number of gallons. So I have a lot of luxury here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use every 2 lines and just count by ones. So I'm going to say that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, and I'm sorry that it gets hard to read over in the corner there, but that's a green 10 down in the bottom right. Then I need to figure out my number of miles, how I can scale the number of miles. I need to go from 0 to 360. Again, I have 22 squares to go, so I can really try to take 360 and divide that by 22, or I can just kind of estimate and think, okay, well, if each square then counts for 10, or each tick mark counts for 10, I'm going to get to 220, which will not allow me to reach my maximum of 360. So I need to count by something a little bit more than 10. I'm going to jump up by 20s. If I count it by 20s, that means if I have 22 tick marks, I'm going to get up to somewhere around 440, which is going to be plenty of room. So I'm going to call each tick mark 20, and just for the sake of labeling, I'm going to skip every tick mark and then just label the 40s. So I have 40, 80, and now I'm just going to kind of jump ahead and have those other numbers filled in. And voila, there we go. So now at least I'm covered all the way. Oops, we're going to get one more to go. I need to go up to 380 because my maximum is 360. So I need to be able to cover that. So now I can just start graphing my information. I had 1 gallon of gas that went 32 miles, so I go up to 1 and a shade under 40. I had 2 gallons that went to 64, so I go a little above 60 mark. I had 3 that went 96, so let's see, that's just above, a little bit above the 80. I jumped up to 5, and I had stuff that goes up to 180, which is a really nice little intersection. And then I had up to 10, and that was at 360. So I go up to my 10, and halfway between 340 and 380. So now my dots, my points plotted, and now I can just line my line up, and there is my line showing the amount of miles I can travel per number of gallons. Final thing we need to do then is to write ourselves an equation. I need to think about the situation that I really did, how I calculated the number of miles, so how I found out how I solved for my dependent variable, and what I really needed to do to understand that question. So in order to solve that, what I did is I used my information. I used my constant because I knew that I traveled 32 miles. And I traveled 32 miles for every gallon. So that means for every different number I put in for gallons, I need to multiply that by 32. So I'm going to say I could take 32 times G, times my number of gallons. What did that give me? Well, as I took my table, as I took 32 times 1, it got me 32. If I took 32 times 2, it got me 64. So when I multiplied those together, what it equaled was the number of miles. Those number of miles changed depending on those number of gallons. Therefore, we use variables to represent those things that can change. We kept the number 32 alone because we could travel that many miles, 32 miles every gallon. That number doesn't change. So we keep it as that constant. Those two things that will change, the gallons and the miles, we used as variables to write our equations. Hopefully this helps us fill in the study guide. Make sure that you talk with works independently on the first part of the study guide. Then make sure you ask your questions to your neighbors, raise your hand, see if you can get help, and we'll be ready for this quiz tomorrow. Come ready tomorrow with questions. Good luck.